In managing my own time, I find that there are certain qualities in other people that are most appealing to me in regard to um, conversations that I expect to be worth my time, to be worth ongoing investments of time. So this is in the general realm of time management, you might say, but everything I'm going to say here also helps to um, bring things into focus so that when I am looking at a solution relating to a health interest or a financial interest, um, that I'm still going to want to manage my time to interact with people who have certain qualities in particular, and to make sure that those qualities are active within the interaction as well. So the three keys that I will address here are self-awareness, humility, and courage. And I should go ahead and note that whatever you think those words, whatever those words mean to you already, fantastic. That's great. I'm presenting some clarification about how I mean those words, and maybe a little bit more on how they can be relevant in regard to what I consider good time management for myself, which you may also find to be beneficial and relevant for you. So self-awareness, obviously that's awareness of one's own self and one's own inner experience. Awareness is the first key to learning and adaptiveness. However, many people are pressured into neglecting their own experiences, innate interests, curiosities, observations, and logic or critical thinking. They may be programmed to be ashamed of certain experiences as negative, as in socially invalidated. In contrast, self-awareness includes a respect for all experiences, as well as respect for the fact that only one experience at a time can be the current priority, or the current focus of interest even. So rather than suppressing or avoiding motivations, self-awareness can cautiously explore motivation to identify the most powerful and the most relevant motivations and to tap into them. With respect for innate motivations and interests, plus for actual experiences and observations, then adaptiveness can develop. Self-direction, self-discipline. So self-awareness is a fundamental key issue. And as I will discuss further and as we go, self-awareness is something that is, we might say, quite rare, and for very good reasons. In other words, there are specific social institutions that inhibit or restrict or combat self-awareness. So self-awareness is the first key to learning and adaptiveness. Second is humility. Many youth are also programmed to memorize ideas without verifying or even critically examining those ideas, and then labeling that process of memorizing the ideas and generally repeating them for rewards, labeling that process as something like this: learning science. So that might be learning doctrines about science. That is certainly not the practice of scientific inquiry or science. They're getting programmed ideas, memorizing those ideas, and repeating them without examining them to receive social validation. That's not scientific inquiry. So humility is our concept here that we're focusing on. Is it a good measure of the accuracy of an idea to only consider how familiar you are with it already? For instance, when you were 2 years old, Would you have rejected the concept of gravity simply on the basis that you were not already familiar with the word gravity? Gravity, I've never heard of that. It must not be a valuable concept because as a 2-year-old, you've never heard of it, right? Nobody's ever used the word gravity. Or if you didn't learn English as your first language and then at age 29, somebody says, oh, that's gravity, that's called gravity. And you're like, well, I didn't know English until I became whatever age and I didn't learn the English word gravity. So it must be an invalid, it can't be a valuable concept because I don't already know it. That is, we could call arrogance or whatever weird thing that would be. Resistance to learning. Arrogance, I don't know. A very strange thing if we talk about it for a 2-year-old, but yet an incredibly common thing for most adults, for so many adults at least. So humility wouldn't be that prejudice against the unfamiliar. Prejudice against the unfamiliar is just, I guess you could say a sign of somebody who's overwhelmed and confused and doesn't want to be any further confused than they already are. Okay. Humility would be at least recognition that an idea being popular does not establish its accuracy. If an idea is familiar, that doesn't establish its accuracy. If it's widely popular, doesn't establish its accuracy. What establishes its accuracy? Testing it. So just because you might have been repeatedly rewarded for memorizing and blindly repeating an idea as science does not establish it as accurate. Just because lots of other people were also rewarded for memorizing and blindly repeating an idea such that it is widely accepted by them, that does not establish it as ever having been tested, confirmed, or even reviewed for logical plausibility. Even reviewed by them for logical plausibility. For instance, consider the plausibility of the idea that cholesterol is a very dangerous substance manufactured by trillions of livers in order to poison the rest of the organism. How reasonable is that? Correlation is not causality. Just because bandages are often found near wounds does not indicate whether the wounds were caused by the bandages or not. In fact, it is a little odd to suggest that bandages cause wounds. We kind of are familiar with the idea that bandages are put in areas where there are already wounds, unless you're just in one of those classes where you're practicing putting bandages on somebody that isn't wounded just to, practice putting bandages on. Generally, you don't use bandages unless there's a wound. Or if you're 2 years old and you get those, Band-Aids with the cartoon characters, then you put them all over your face and all over your clothes, and that's different. But normally bandages and Band-Aids and so on, those are put on existing wounds. They don't cause the wounds. They're put on after the wounds are already there. So, just because cholesterol or white blood cells may be found near injured tissue does not establish that the tissue was injured by the various components of the immune system. The idea that the substances that the immune system manufactures and uses for the benefit of the organism are poisons is a little bit unusual. I think it's unusual. Maybe you don't, but I think it's unusual. The more popular an idea is, however, the less likely it is for people to question it or verify it. So if people have been pounded with hysteria and paranoia about cholesterol, it's very scary, then they're anxious about it. Their anxiety is real. Is it intelligent? Has it been thoroughly examined and critically tested? Well, the more popular that an idea is, or put it this way, the more that it's pounded on them with terror and paranoia and hysteria, the less likely they are to address it with logic, because there's so much emotion and so much anxiety and stress. So the more popular that an idea is, the less likely it is for people to question it or verify it. And the less popular that an idea is, the more likely it is for some people to hysterically reject it as threatening to their pretenses of wisdom. I already mentioned that if somebody is quite confused, and especially if they're pretending not to be confused, but they're quite confused, then they don't want a lot of unfamiliar information because it could confuse them further, or it could reveal their confusion, which they are trying to hide out of anxiety and shame and distress. So humility could involve admitting distress when there's distress, at least admitting it to some people, to those that I feel safe admitting it to, and also admitting that the popularity of an idea or my familiarity with an idea does not establish the accuracy of the idea. Even the fact that I've done something for years doesn't establish that it's accurate. So confirmation bias means, well, that the idea with confirmation bias that's relevant to what I'm saying here is if I've done something a lot, I tend to have a bias to confirm the thing that I've already done. I want to look for things that justify my investment of time and money and so on. So the more invested that I've been in something, the more biased I am to think of it as a good thing. The less likely I am to be receptive to criticism and scientific inquiry. I don't want scientific inquiry in some cases. You know, the more hysterical that I am, the more ashamed that I am, the less I want scientific inquiry or critical analysis of some activity that I've invested in a lot. So humility means I'm actually open to critical thinking, scientific inquiry, even if it goes against doctrines about science that have been programmed to lots of people. That's really not important from a perspective of humility. With that foundation of interest and self-awareness, if I find an issue to be relevant and interesting to me, then I can bring humility to my exploration. Just because I am not already familiar with an idea does not establish it as useless. In fact, I'm interested in things I'm unfamiliar with, because if I'm unfamiliar, then maybe I'm going to learn something relevant. Things that I already know, I don't learn. They're not things that I learn. I want to learn something that's relevant, that I don't already know. That's how I call it learning. So things that I do already know, or that I have already heard of, or that are widely popular, I might have a added degree of skepticism about the accuracy or relevance of those things, because why is it that some group went out of their way to publicize those ideas so much? Is it for the benefit of that group that did the publicizing? Maybe so. If I, out of my own spontaneous interest, no pressure, I just spontaneously get interested in something, maybe a friend of mine, or in a casual interaction, I hear about something and I start to explore it and I get interested in it. And then as time goes on, I find that it is relevant to me, that it seems relevant and intriguing, then great. And if I eventually find one or two authors or resources that I think, wow, I really found them valuable, I can continue to be open to new information or to contrary information, contrary to what's already familiar. Even if I like a particular author or a particular institution, even if I invest my time in their methods and have some success, that doesn't stop me from exploring other researchers or other methods. So humility is, you might call, open-mindedness. I'm not competing for social approval and presenting myself as already knowing everything that's relevant to know. I'm actually open to learning additional things over time. So a year goes by or a decade goes by, I'm expecting to learn some new stuff over that time in the future. In the future, I'm expecting to learn. That's humility. As in contrast to people who are hysterically resisting learning and ridiculing unfamiliar ideas. That may be something that I've done at times when I was quite confused and socially anxious and really just needed to withdraw from all that, social attention that was overwhelming for me. So I was confused. I didn't want anybody to know I was confused. And what may have been best for me is to withdraw from social pressure and then have a context where I can develop self-awareness and humbly explore new information at my own pace, with support from other people who have a similar orientation. Self-awareness, open-mindedness or humility, and that, a rigor in regard to quality of inquiry, interested in accuracy as distinct from fixated on popularity or familiarity. So humility isn't so interested in popularity or familiarity, prior familiarity. Humility is interested in accuracy, relevance. Results. The final of the three topics is courage. It's still related. It's kind of an extension of the same momentum we've already addressed. Courage. There may be, social institutions that are designed to interfere with self-awareness and natural humility, like the humility of a 2-year-old. Even social institutions that are designed to direct people's attention, focus people on certain curriculum content, program people to memorize those things, reward people for blindly repeating those things that they've memorized. Maybe some ridiculing of things that are contrary to whatever is presented as a fact in the curriculum. Whether the curriculum has any actual evidence or not is a different issue, but just if there's something in the curriculum and then there's some contrary idea, well, the contrary idea could be ridiculed just because it's contrary to what's in the official curriculum of the social institution. So there may be, possibly, social institutions that are designed to interfere with self-awareness and natural humility. Instead, the institutions may reward conformity, may reward arrogant presumptiveness or promote arrogant presumptiveness, ridicule contrary ideas, and the institutions may also promote fixation on programmed topics only. So these are the topics that are important, and anything that's not on our list is not important. We're not going to be tested on it. And what we're going to be tested on is the important stuff. That's how the institutions work, right? So critical thinking within the rituals of these institutions may or may not be specifically censored, since there is no need to censor it really when the constant ritual is to stick to the curriculum and to memorize and blindly repeat certain specific ideas. So you don't have to really censor other ideas, because the only thing that is allowed or is rewarded is learn these pre-established ideas that some group put on the curriculum, and then we promote that or publicize that. Learn those ideas and blindly repeat them. So you don't really need to censor critical thinking. Critical thinking can usually just be ignored, or if relevant, it can be labeled as disruptive, and then disruptive participants, if they're extremely disruptive, can be drugged or simply expelled. Their disruptions will be addressed somehow. But as far as a democratic process or an openness to the input of the students or to the parents of the students, that's not really part of most educational systems. There is a curriculum that is determined by private institutions like the Rockefeller Foundation, and then the Rockefeller Foundation, they lobby the federal government or whoever they lobby, they get certain things put into the curriculum, and then that's what's promoted and publicized. Are those ideas that are in the curriculum thoroughly tested? Well, that's a different issue. So some people may find these statements that I'm making now unsettling or even shameful. However, we can have the courage to find people who are emotionally stable enough to respectfully consider these ideas without panicking or erupting into contempt or condemnation. Systems for governing or ruling human populations exist. If those systems promote certain specific outcomes, so be it. They use certain methods, so be it. We don't have to immediately rescue everyone from the existence of systems of coercion and indoctrination. We can recognize there are systems of coercion and indoctrination, and they have influence, and they will probably exist tomorrow, and in 3 hours, and in 3 weeks, and they might not be going away anytime soon. Because of the effectiveness of certain systems of intimidation, which is coercion and indoctrination, coercion involves intimidation. So because of the effectiveness of certain systems of intimidation or bullying, many people will be extremely anxious about even admitting to the intensity of the social anxieties that are ritually promoted by certain systems. If someone has been a participant in a system, if they're sending their children to certain systems, certain institutions, then they might be resigned, they might be numb, they might be embarrassed, they might not want to look closely at the effects of those systems or the design of those systems, the methods of those systems, may want to ignore all that stuff and just, hey, withdraw from that subject. Because is it on a test? If it's not on a test, if I don't have to make any comments about it to get my tax refund, then I just want to get my tax refund. Okay, understand. Some people might be interested in exploring some of these issues. Many people might not. Some people could be very anxious about them. They could be very, but it's justified, or, but there's a lot of good things about the systems. Okay, that isn't what I'm saying. I'm not, it's interesting that people will argue with a point that wasn't even made. I'm not saying there isn't good or there isn't value in these systems or there isn't benefit to certain parties by the systems. Of course, if the Rockefeller Foundation, lobbies for certain things, it's probably because they expect for those things to be beneficial to the participants in the Rockefeller Foundation. Sure, these systems benefit some people, and they have layers of benefits that extend to different people, some benefits go to a lot of people, some benefits only go to a very select few people, but nothing's particularly unusual about that. So what is the courageous option when we recognize some of these facts? What is the courageous option? The courageous option, I suggest, is to stabilize oneself in self-awareness. Could be calm alertness. To stabilize oneself also in overall functionality. Health, wealth, good communication, good time management, high quality interactions. The courageous option is to stabilize oneself in self-awareness and overall functionality then to selectively interact with others, to be selective about who I interact with and what subjects and what dynamics do I invest my time into. Perhaps we occasionally present someone with a result, like a case study of a result that was produced, and then invite them to ask for details if they're interested. If some people are not interested, or if a lot of people are not interested, or even if they seem threatened by a particular idea, that may be of no special interest whatsoever. As for the programmed idea of exhausting oneself for the common good, that is a reliable program for self-sabotage, for exhaustion. Do we really need anyone else's gratitude for us? Do I need anyone else's gratitude for me? If I go through the day and nobody expresses gratitude toward me, is that how important is that? Now, I might appreciate and value gratitude being expressed towards me, but do I need it? Is it essential? What if we focus more on expressing our gratitude for others than on competing for the gratitude of others? To put it in first person, what if I focus more on expressing my gratitude for others, specific others, than on competing for the gratitude of others in general? That would be gratitude. I didn't put that as one of my qualities here, but humility is the willingness to express gratitude as distinct from the anxious competition to receive gratitude so that I can distract myself from an underlying shame or something. If I don't have an underlying shame, if I have an underlying humility, and I'm not trying to avoid humiliation and avoid humility because I'm already humble, then I can express gratitude towards others. I don't have to compete for gratitude. If it comes, okay, I will probably notice that. And it's just simple. And as far as saving everyone from the existence of systems of coercion and indoctrination, well, I don't know that I'm going to save anyone. I'm going to influence people and promote the well-being of specific people, whether that's because they pay me to help them promote their self-interest or for any other reason. But everyone, I'm not that interested in everyone being grateful for me or everyone agreeing with me. In fact, there's a whole lot of people, and the vast majority of them I don't know and I don't notice. Most humans alive right now, I do not notice. So courage, well, obviously courage involves some perhaps unusual kinds of honesty, but courage also involves respecting the dangers or risks of certain popular systems, certain popular institutions. So courage means admitting to those risks and respecting those risks, and maybe withdrawing from interactions or being very conservative in regard to one's interactions with those institutions because we respect the military capacity of the police department or the Internationalist Terrorist League or whatever. I'm just making up a term there. The United Nations, well, they have a lot of military influence, or NATO. They've got a lot of military capacity. Should I respect them just because they are a powerful group that is willing to do mass destruction and capable of doing mass destruction? Well, I think that's a reasonable justification to respect them. I respect volcanoes. I respect hurricanes. They can be very destructive and dangerous. Why not respect bomber jets that have big bombs in them. It seems just intelligent to respect them. They're dangerous. So courage involves courage can involve respecting the dangers of certain popular systems or institutions, and also respecting our own innate interests, which might be to reduce our exposure to those dangers or risks. At least at a particular point in time, we might want to reduce our exposure to those risks. Do my favorite practices need to be popular in order for me to be satisfied with the results that they produce? With courage, I don't need popularity for me to be satisfied with the result. I might not even tell anybody that I'm satisfied with the result or what practice I'm using. I don't need validation. I don't need gratitude. All I need is satisfaction. I know my interests, and if they're satisfied, that's important to me. So that can involve courage, to just be focused on my interests and what methods satisfy them, and not need validation, and not need to compete for gratitude. That could involve courage. My favorite practices do not need to be popular in order for me to be satisfied with the results that they produce. Popularity of a method is distinct from my satisfaction with results of the method. And the two things may even often be contrary to one another, meaning the more popular a method is, the less satisfied I may be with the result of it. And the less popular method, the more satisfied I may be with the result of it in some cases. So if I'm attracted to above average results, then average methods, as in the most popular or most publicized methods, may be of little or no interest to me. So how much would I talk about them and how bad they are? Well, enough to set up a repulsion toward those methods and results in myself, that I don't use them, and then I'm ready to move on towards methods that are more appealing. So if I have a kind of a internal momentum or a habitual interest in certain methods, then I need to actually generate repulsion, and I maybe need to condemn them and have other people validate my condemnation of those methods as a transitional thing. But eventually, I just am interested in the things that serve my interests and are satisfying to me. Does it promote my health well? Is it relevant to promoting my wealth or financial stability? Is it something that improves my communication, my satisfaction, my quality of life, my time management? Does it benefit me in a way that is really aligned with my priority at any particular time? As my priorities change, do I get the benefits that fit with whatever my priority interest is at that time? That's what relevance means. So the three keys: self-awareness, rather than obsession with anything that's, some institution's interests and curriculum. Self-awareness. So that's the first key. Then humility, as distinct from avoiding humiliation because something that is familiar to me isn't accurate or isn't the best possible method. Rather than defending hysterically that whatever is familiar to me is accurate or popular, I'm open to learning. So that's humility. And courage, even without being validated by other people, I'm open to exploring things. That's courage. I'm open to respecting fear, risk, danger. If there's some amount of ridicule or discouragement that is directed toward me, courage can involve persisting even in the midst of discouragement or social invalidation. Maybe I shift to being more private, but courage would involve continuing to do what fits my interests. Know what my interests are, that's self-awareness. Open to learning new methods, that's humility. And then the willingness to apply those methods and refine those methods, that's courage.